While Abdul al-Rahman consolidated his power in Spain, in Morocco it was Idris II, the son of Idris I, who went on to establish the city of Fez, which remains to this day one of the great strongholds of the Islamic faith. 2,000 Arab families came to settle here in 814, followed by 8,000 Arab families from Spain. Fez is famous for its medieval Medina, with its labyrinth of narrow streets and alleyways. This giant walled city, home to 70,000 people, is the world's largest urban car-free zone, and everything today still needs to be brought in by hand-pulled carts or even donkeys. The heart of the city is its 9th century Karawan Mosque, established in 859, which is also the sanctuary for the tomb of Idris II. It contains what is thought to be the oldest university in the world. Over the centuries, the mosque has been encased by the Medina surrounding it.
Fès est une ville cosmopolite. Elle a accueilli d'abord les Berbères, les Arabes, les gens qui venaient de Palestine, d'Irak et du nord de l'Arabie, et surtout les Andalous. Donc un mélange de cultures qui a donné une richesse considérable. Mais il était lié à un réseau d'échanges, non seulement d'échanges économiques, mais d'échanges d'hommes et de biens, d'idées. Donc il y avait des artistes qui venaient, des artisans, des savants qui enseignaient à l'université, des militaires et parfois des constructeurs qui faisaient les bâtiments en même temps.
After the death of Idris II, a new dynasty came to power, and they would found another great city and make it their capital. What is known today as the Pink City was founded in 1062 by a Berber dynasty known as the Almoravids. Their most charismatic leader was Yusuf bin Tashfin. The Almoravids constructed a 20-kilometre, 8-metre-high mud wall around the city in 1126, giving a distinct colour which survives to this day. It's been repaired and rebuilt many times in the 900 years since. And they introduced an ingenious underground irrigation system that still supports a vast palmyra outside Marrakesh. The Almoravid version of strict Orthodox Islam spread across Morocco and into neighbouring Algeria. And at the age of 80, Yusuf bin Tashfin launched a series of daring invasions of the Iberian Peninsula.
In terms of a powerful warlord figure, Tashfin is the great figure. I mean, he remains a Puritan from the desert, wearing clothes that were woven by his own family, waging a holy war for 45 years.
To protect their newly won territory, the Moors built giant fortress palace complexes known as El-Khazabas. Construction of some, like the old El-Khazaba at Malaga, had begun more than 200 years earlier during the reign of Cordoban-based dynasty of Abdul al-Rahman. But the Almoravids embellished the El-Khazaba, adding many of the 100 towers that survive to this day. A series of fortified gates take you to the inner sanctum of the palace grounds. The Moors were renowned for their gardens and use of water, delivered by simple but ingenious irrigation methods to create an ambience of peace and tranquility to their surroundings. But the Moors also built more practical structures used for defence only. Further northwest on the banks of the Guadiana River in Merida, where the Romans had built one of the longest bridges ever constructed by the empire. The Moors built this Alcazaba on the site of a previous Visigoth fortress. And in Seville, on the banks of the River Guadalquivir, the Torre de Oro watchtower was constructed in 1221. It's still here today. The Moors' territory stretched as far north as Zaragoza near Barcelona, where they constructed the Aljaferia Palace, which hundreds of years later would be occupied and converted by Spanish monarchs. Many conquests of the Iberian Peninsula were launched from here, the modern-day capital of Morocco, Rabat. But right from the start, the battles between Moors and Christians seesawed over the decades, a pattern which would be repeated over the centuries. As early as the 11th century, Moors would return from Spain after military defeats, and in Rabat, they settled here in the Rabat harbour entrance, in an area known as the Kasbah of the Weeders. The unique blue and white washed homes of the refugees are still here today. The Almoravids also embellished Fez, in addition to their capital Marrakesh. Skilled craftsmen were imported from Spain. Countless new buildings and fountains were erected. By 1145, we're told there were 10,000 shops and 785 mosques. But very few monuments from a century of Almoravid rule remain. In Marrakesh, the most significant remaining Almoravid mosque is a small shrine known as the Kuba, now undergoing restorative work. The Almoravid successors, the Almorads, were also Berbers, but when they overthrew the Almoravids in 1147, they plundered and destroyed their legacy, a trend that would be repeated with coming dynasties over the centuries. From their bridgehead cities in Spain, warrior Sultan Yaqub el-Mansur won great battles, first in Portugal. Renowned as a great builder of mosques, he then defeated the Christians at Vera and de Lacos in Spain. El-Mansur's most famous mosque was the Ketubia here in Marrakesh. Its 70-metre-high tower became a prototype of the genre, its influence apparent in Moroccan minarets since the 12th century.
The towers are also fully functional. They're not decorative. They're not little finials like a sort of Mamluk tower or Ottoman minarets. They've all got practical ramps. They're all lit with light wells, and they're all used for the muezzin. Often the commander, the sultan, the emir, the caliph himself, climbing to the minaret tower and calling his army together in the mosque. So there's obedience and order, almost a sort of Norman respect for architecture as an expression of state power.
The design was also copied in the Moors' Spanish territories. Seville's massive cathedral, the world's largest, is itself a former mosque. Its giant bell tower, the Giralda, used to be a minaret. The tower is 342 feet high and remains one of the most important symbols of the city, as it has been since medieval times. The Almohads used the Ketubia in Marrakesh as a model for the Giralda. The tower's first two-thirds is the former minaret, built between 1184 and 1198, and the upper third, Spanish Renaissance architecture. After Seville was taken by the Christians in 1248, this former mosque was converted into a church. The final third of the tower is today an outstanding example of the Gothic and Baroque architectural styles.
It's quite startling going into the cathedral in Seville. It still has the feeling of having been something else in the past.
C'était les mêmes artisans, les mêmes architectes, les mêmes décorateurs.